Welcome to Chasing the Beats, a show dedicated to weeklybeats.com artists, their songs, and stories from the 2024 season. I'm your host, SQF, and our guest today is James Alone. All right, welcome to James Alone, or your Weekly Beats name is actually Alone Music for anyone looking for you.
Yep, that's me, or just James, or Alone. Either one works for me, really. So
Awesome. Well, thanks for being on.
yeah, thanks for inviting me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Excited to jump into your music. Admittedly, I did not listen to a ton of your stuff over 2024, so it was cool to jump in and do a deeper dive. And 2024 was not your first Weekly Beats.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I started in 2016 was the first one, which I did.
Nice.
I did 2016, 2018, and then I took 2020 off, not for the reasons which most people would have taken 2020 off. And then I returned in 2022. And then 2024 was actually the first time I did a Weekly Beats where it was like 2022. I'd kind of like burnt myself out doing it, I think. I just really went for it full on. And I was also trying to do multiple other things like have a life and other things. So, the usual stuff. And then, so I said to myself that 2024 would be like a year where I just like kind of really strip it back and just kind of do it when I felt like it and not hold myself accountable to it. And then that actually snowballed into me doing actually pretty well for the first 20 weeks. And then life took a turn, and then I was like, well, I'm not gonna be able to finish this, or like, hey, I have no capacity to do any of that. So I kind of dropped out about mid-year, and then I put out a couple of tracks right at the end when I had some when I'd got back into the gear of things.
Yeah. Well, at least you came back.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't stop thinking about it. That was the thing. It's just there, just niggling away.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's this like mentality of like, oh, if I broke the streak, then like, why even finish?
Yeah. I think that's the thing that a lot of people kind of feel when they're into these kind of like streak ideas and things. Like, what happens if I actually miss it? And then it becomes like this massive thing on your back that, what if I actually finally miss a thing? And then it turns out actually nothing bad happens. And life goes on, but you're free to go back at any time. And it's actually quite freeing in some ways.
It is. I went through that with this podcast because I got sick and I had like built up all these episodes and then kind of depleted them and then got sick. And then I was like, oh no, I'm going to break my streak. And then I was like, stuff happens. And then I just went back to doing it. So
that's it. I think it's having knowing that you can go back to it and knowing that you can do it again, that it's like nothing has actually broken. The only thing that's broken is a little number somewhere, and no one's holding you accountable. So.
It's true. Yeah. We put the most pressure on ourselves.
Absolutely.
And how did you get into Weekly Beats? Like, how did you find it back in 2016 or 2015?
So, yeah, I was thinking back to when it was that it kind of like started happening for me. And I think it was, so I've been making music for quite a long time before then, like early 2000s. I started just messing about on my computer, and I'd never really done anything seriously with it. I'd always just kind of, well, notably in those early days, I was like pirating stuff and just playing with like sequences and things and making horrible noises. But then around when I left university, like 2008, 2009 sort of time, I got into like chiptune and like that whole scene of things, like all the micro music folk, and I will fail to name any of them because my brain is just a fog at the moment. But I started making like sort of around like 2014, 2015 sort of time. I'd sort of made a few friends in like the local UK scene and had actually started playing gigs and things, which was like new for me. And I think I saw it on Twitter that a few people were just going to do this thing called Weekly Beats. And I was just like, hey, that sounds fun. So I remember like the first week was just like, you just submit a track. And I was like, oh, I'll just make a track. I'll just submit a track. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, that was it. Just, I think the whole, you have to do it every week just kind of caught me like way, way into actually exercising that musical muscle and
Yeah.
like continually as well. Cause I'd been very patchy on and off, like releasing like an EP here or like something there. And
Yeah.
Weekly Beats just absolutely laser focused me on actually doing stuff and also discovering more about what I liked about music and what I liked to do and what I liked to play and make. So,
Yeah, so when you were gigging, what instrument were you playing?
all sorts. So,
Okay. Okay.
I had this in my head for a long time that I would try and stay away from a laptop as much as possible, which is why I was
I like
really
that
drawn
policy.
to like chiptune and stuff. I've absolutely gone back on this. Now I just make everything in Ableton, so it's fine. uh, but I was like, I had this iPad app which was like a MIDI sequencer because I've always done really badly with trackers, and it's never just clicked for me. And if I can see music like Lego blocks and along
Mhm.
a track, that's perfect for me. Just give me that. I need that. And I found this like MIDI sequencer for like the iPad 2, which I just discovered in a box behind me. I was digging through things so I could remember the names of stuff. No charge, nothing working, but it was like an iPad with a MIDI output, which was really dodgy because it was coming out of one of those like the pre-lightning, the big fat
Oh, yeah,
cable
yeah, the
thing,
big adapter.
and then that went into a MIDI splitter, and then I had a NES with a MIDI NES cartridge, which I still have. I've melted half of
Nice.
it, but it still works, which is great. Then a Game Boy Advance running MGB, which is just MIDI sequencing again. And then I used to have a old MPC 500, which was like loaded up with like a body of samples where I was doing all my drums and things from, because I've never quite like got on with the like chiptune style drums and things that
Mhm.
well. And I was kind of like to DJ Shadow sort of beats and things like that. So I was like, oh, I'll just
Yeah.
throw that in there. Surely it'll sound like DJ Shadow if I just do it on that thing. Doesn't, but it's fine. And then I made like this guitar pedal thing that would sequence along the tracks so I could stamp on it and it would go to the next bit of the song. So I could
Oh,
then
okay.
loop a guitar over the top of it. So it's kind of like this mess of equipment and stuff. It needed a massive case
Wow.
to kind of go in.
So
And
you
that was
have a pedal where you can sequence through the different MIDI sections of the song
Yeah, yeah, it's like it's
and
an
then play guitar
Arduino.
over them.
Yeah, yeah, it's like an
That's pretty
Arduino
sweet.
sort of thing with a foot switch, and yeah, that just about worked. That got me through a couple of years anyway. I don't know if it still works, but I haven't gigged for years now. But that was kind of my
Yeah.
idea, was that it would all be live, it'd all be looping, but it was incredibly difficult to actually write anything on it because
Yeah.
everything was just everywhere all the time, and you needed like an on-stage mixer, and then you'd be the sound guy's like nightmare because I was there just trying to mix it on stage and then give him an output that would actually sound good on the sound system, and they would just be like shaking their head at me just going, don't do that, don't do that. So
So this was a band, I guess keeping with the theme here, James Alone, it was just you.
yeah, it was just me. I think that was the ethos I was going for. It was just like,
Got
it's just
it.
going to be me, but I'm going to try and make as much sound as possible with as
Yeah.
much things as but without being like strapping a drum kit to myself. So
And so you were already composing music and putting out some tracks prior to Weekly Beats, but Weekly Beats attracted you because it was like, all right, I'm gonna do something every week.
yeah, I think that was it. I think it was just I was just kind of like coming off the back of like moving like city, and I didn't really like that whole live setup thing just wasn't really, other than setting it up, which was fun. It wasn't
Yeah.
actually really inspiring me to make anything new, and it wasn't really
Yeah.
driving me to like create what it was kind of like in my head when I wanted to make music.
Mhm.
And yeah, it just felt like a way into doing that. Like, okay, I'll set up all my stuff. It was all set up in my room at the time, so I just had this big box on the side of my on my like bedside table basically, and it was all just plugged into my laptop, and it's just like write something, and then next
Mhm.
week write something on this. And I was also learning how to use Ableton at the time because I'd already thrown the iPad out in a fit of sort of rage. And from there it just kind of, yeah, kind of just snowballed into like discovering what I wanted to sound like, and also being able to kind of like articulate that in the
Yeah.
sounds that was actually coming back at me. So
Yeah. So, uh, that first year, what did you find as far as, like, what you actually liked or, what came out of that first year that was sort of unexpected?
I think it was kind of like the process of going through it every week helped me kind of explore the tools which I was then using to compose. So I I'm not a particularly technical person when it comes to like understanding everything a piece of software can do. And Ableton is one of those things where you can, well, for one thing, like I see people and they're just using like the song blocks and they're just kind of DJing almost like out their tracks
Mhm.
using like a live controller or something and triggering their loops live and stuff like that. And I don't use that view at all. I just use the song editor. I write in the song editor. I just like create tracks, duplicate tracks. And a lot of it was about getting into a flow of like, okay, I've got my tracks laid out in Ableton, and I actually use the same preset which I used back in 2016. I've just kind of updated it a little bit, which is just all of my MIDI tracks ready to go with all of my like outboard synthesizers and things ready to go, all there. Then it's got two default like tracks. One of them's for the microphone, which is like when I want to record acoustic guitar or just make weird noises with my mouth into the like sequencer, and
Yeah.
then the other one is just for the guitar. And the guitar is just like direct in. I've got a what is it? It's right in front of me. I'm just trying to read it off the thing. It's a Scala 18i8, so it's got like 8 inputs on the Scala thing,
Nice.
and that's done me well. That was basically it. It was just like, well, that plus a few weird things, and you've got two extra outputs for just like plugging in. What are they called? The little pocket operators and things. I love those.
Mhm,
They're
mhm.
great. So the first
Yeah.
year, I just gotten hold of like three of them, and they're all over the tracks because what I was doing was just like playing in these little melodies on it, and then just like chopping them up and like then looping
That's
that
cool.
chopped up thing and using that as like the bed of the music. And that was one thing which I was really getting into, was like you kind of build these beds of synthesizers and delays and reverbs and things, and all of that is mashing together, and then like kind of like almost like melody and structure comes out of that.
Yeah.
And when you bring in the guitar and stuff, that just kind of like focuses in on like, okay, right, these are your root notes, this is like the thing that's going to carry you through it. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Building
yeah,
all the layers.
yeah, and there's lots of layers, there's loads of them.
Yeah, I mean, listening to your stuff, there's lots of layers, but I feel like everything sits in sonic space very well. Like I was selecting songs on my laptop the other day, and then I was kind of going back to my picks the other night, listening on headphones, and I was like, "Whoa, these." Like, of course, everything deserves headphones, but, like, your mixes, I was like, "Wow, like, this mixing is really, really good."
Oh, thank you.
So, uh
I've never considered myself particularly great at mixing. So.
no? I mean, wow, like, I guess just putting the reps in since 2016, you've gotten good at it. Uh, what other since 2016, I'm sure you've learned a lot of just, like, process and mixing and, like, what are some things you would go back to 2016 James and be like, "Here's some, like, top level things that I've learned."
Oh, well, if those ozone plugins were around in 2016, I'd tell him to use those because they're great. That's basically how I master and mix most things.
Okay.
I
I'm not
think
familiar with these plugins.
I would bring them up, but I have closed Ableton down so I can make noise here. They're good. They're just like a great suite of standard, like just solid preset plugins, and I think that that's the thing that really I think like what you're saying is like if personally, when you're saying like, "Oh, your mixes are good," it's like I think my mixes are consistent at the very best. Like if you listen to everything which I do, it's like I try and make it kind of the same, like it exists in
Mhm.
its own world of sound, and that world of
Yeah.
sound kind of works. And that was really important to kind of like figure out how I'm going to deliver that every week. And that's like one of those things where
Yes.
you're problem solving. So you kind of come at it like a problem and you're like, okay, I've got to be creating a song which has got like some of them have got like 43 tracks or something in there just of just
Wow.
noodles and samples and all sorts just going on mostly at the same time as well because I'm mad. And how are you going to get that into like a shippable thing? It's kind of
Yeah.
like since 2016 I've obviously gotten into like a quite like my main job is like in software development and I work as a designer, so I'm just working in
Mhm.
sprints all the time and you're just thinking about shippable products all the time.
Yeah.
And it's weird that you could suddenly like put that back into like the most creative of your pursuits and just say, actually I can make this a lot easier if I just think about it in this way.
Yeah.
So like my mastering chain is always the same one. I literally just have the preset ready to go, and then I know that I highlight all of my tracks. I push the volume down till they're not clipping anymore, and then I shove them into the mastering suite, and then I start
Yeah.
tweaking around. Usually that means that the drums are you can never hear them, so I'm usually just pushing the drums back up. But yeah, that's kind of what I would teach 2016 me is to be a bit more consistent about it because I spent
Yeah.
I think that was until like halfway through 2018 when I realized that I could save a preset and I'd be like, "Oh, that's good. I'm so
Oh, this
glad
is
I
way
don't."
easier.
Yeah, I don't have to do that every single week. Just setting up a MIDI track and trying to remember, like, okay, MIDI channel 4 is the noise channel on the GBA, but 5 somehow seems to be the NES's noise other thing, and it's like, it's all ready to go now. It's there.
I mean, I think Weekly Beats definitely puts the production in music production because you do have to come up with these ways of working, templates, presets that you're not troubleshooting every week and you can just like crank out and or not worry about that part of the process.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like you kind of need to as well if you're going to be trying to push like other things like your songwriting or your structure and like trying to articulate like a musical idea in any of this.
Yeah.
You have to kind of like have those fallbacks, and I think that as you go through a year or 2 years or 3 years or four or more,
Yeah.
and you're building those kind of like it is the reps. It's like the motions that you need to go through. It's like your stretches which you need to do, and your warm down bit after a run or something,
Mhm.
where you have to just get everything in line and just say, right, that's my mastering chain. It's done. It's mastered. I know it's not the greatest thing that I could have done, but I would need to go pay someone to do that for me, or like I'd have to figure out something else. And I'm not doing that now. I'm just focusing on this music, and the music is the most
Yeah.
important thing. So
And it's great for 1 week of work.
exactly, and it's fit. It fits. That's it. It just needs to fit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Another topic that always comes up is experimentation and how do you push the boundaries so that you are always kind of trying to break out of, like, your normal box. At least I'm always trying to figure that out. So, over the
Mhm.
years, what have you done to kind of push and branch out and continue experimenting?
I usually find it's like quite a it's like it's an additive thing. Like you kind of have like your base set of sounds and coming from like the sort of more chip tune side of things, you really don't have that much to work with. So you're trying to wring everything you can out of those like four channels on your Game Boy or your NES or
Yeah,
whatever you've got. But I think what that means is that when you do introduce something else, that is suddenly becomes like the highlight point of that track when you do it. And a couple of the tracks which I've chosen when we talk about it, I've are ones where like I remember like that's the track where I did that. And it was like I can go back to that time when I was playing with that thing for the first time. It's usually just like a specific plugin which I'd never turned on or never
got it.
chosen before. And being open to like what that suddenly can add to your like the whole bed of what everything else you do, because everything else you do is usually comes naturally, particularly like
Mhm.
I know I play when I play guitar, I am not the best guitar player in the world. I will drench it in delay, I will drench it in reverb, and everything kind of gets muddied into that mix. But then I remember one of my friends just sent me a video of, hey, you could record a guitar line and then double time it. I was like, no, I didn't know I could do that. I could sound like a much better guitar player if I did that. And then I spent ages doing that all the time. And then you realize that you're just chopping up your guitar lines and like creating new melodies out of them. So everything just kind
Uh-huh.
of goes into this churn of like what it is that you do. And as long as you're kind of like honest with like the way you want to make that music and the way that you want to kind of progress that track or something, or just let the
Yeah.
track progress itself, that's always an exciting thing. So I think most weeks I'm usually trying something new, but it doesn't sound it because it's in the milieu of everything else in there, and I'm usually excited by the thing that no one else finds excited by it. So
Yeah, it's like you try a new preset and you're like, "Oh, I think this is a sound that I can work into this track."
yeah, absolutely. And in fact, actually, I was thinking about like what I did in 2024. And as I was saying, I didn't finish that year, but I'd also try to be honest with myself that I wasn't going to. I didn't even set up my gear that year, really. I just said, right, laptop, let's go through the presets. Let's just see what I can do with Ableton. Can I make things
Yeah.
that sound like what I would have like a million cables out to do?
Yeah, yeah.
Can I do that just on my laptop in a lunch break at work or like just over an
Yeah.
evening, like just with my
Lower the
headphones on?
barrier to creating.
Yeah, and trying to be kind to myself and just say, well, I wonder what I could do with this. And then at some point that year, I was just like, I'll just plug in my guitar for a bit and see what happens if I do that for a bit. And then like some other tracks started coming out, and I was like, this is interesting. It was like being inspired by like other artists and things like from like which I've loved in the past and things, and just bringing those in and just kind of treating it a lot more like an opportunity to demo new ideas and try to like kind of just like play in a different way and stuff. So that was always good. That was one thing which I really valued from like the last year.
Was there kind of just a relief of pressure by not having to connect to, like, all these things and just focus more on experimenting?
Yeah. That was really it. Was just like to say you have this infinite box of tools in front of you. Like
Yeah.
what else can it do if you remove all of the things that you know from it? And it turns out a lot of the things sound like exactly the same as the other stuff which I was doing. So it was like, well, I'm just like drawn to square waves and things like that because you do want to keep it simple still, and it's like you find
Yeah.
your own like the sounds that I like are still the sounds that I like, regardless of where it's coming from. And then you get into
Yeah.
the whole thing of just like, can I make a sound that sounds like a sort of like a post rock guitar sound? Can you do that with a synthesizer? And it's like, well, it's actually kind of easy if you just sit there with enough plugins and starting to put in like fake
Mhm.
amps on top of them, and you can create those like wailing sounds and things. It's
Yeah.
but it's fun. It's fun. It's and I think treating it like that and just treating it like a toy box was the best thing I could have
Yeah.
done to reduce the pressure that I would put myself under before.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, a big part is just reducing that pressure. So it's I mean, it's supposed to be fun.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And I get a lot of fun out of it. And I think sometimes when you're in it, when you're doing it, you can be like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this to myself? And I think being kind to yourself and also understanding that, like, well, I mean, for me, this is going to be like possibly the most egotistical thing I'll ever say is that I genuinely like listening to the things I do, and
I mean, I think that's great. I don't think that's
yeah,
egotistical.
and I think more artists should feel like that sometimes. When I hear someone who is just always like down in the dumps about their sound or something, it's like, well, what
Yeah.
do you like
Yeah.
about it? What's the thing that's driving you to do it? And then why aren't you focusing on that part? Like, I genuinely like the stuff I do, and also I don't hear many people do it in the way that I do it, and that's pleasurable to me. Like, I just like, this is nice. I like things that sound like this, and there's probably very good reasons why other people don't do it the way I do it,
I
but they are
mean,
probably
I
busy
think a
making
big
money
one
or
is
something.
yeah, everyone's just doing their own thing. And I think it's
Yeah,
good that you have your sound that you like and you're making things that you like. Uh because at the end of the day, you're kind of making all this for yourself
absolutely. Yeah,
because I mean, like no one's going to get rich off of this music. Uh it's just having fun, being creative, and sharing it with another community who's got the same time constraints. They're making their own stuff. Uh, and that's why I really don't like when people post on Weekly Beats and they're like, I hated this song.
mm.
I'm like, let me decide what I think about it. Like you're already sort of like coloring my perception of it by telling me like this is gonna suck.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
absolutely.
I don't like to hear people just, like, down on their own music.
No, no, I think that there's, as long as there's that spark in there for someone to like think that um they're pushing themselves or they're trying something new, or like they're just genuinely excited to present something that they're like, hey, I did this. I did it in a
Yeah.
week. I didn't even do it in a week. I did it in a night. I did it an hour before the deadline or something like
Yeah.
that. That's great fun. And it's just like,
Oh, yeah.
you must have so much stuff down in your head and ready to go to be able to even do that, because most people can't. So that's amazing. And I love that about the whole community. And when I'm listening back to things, I'm always blown away by everything that I hear on the Weekly Beats channel. Like, it's genuinely like genuinely intimidating in some ways, in that you're just like, oh my god, there's people
Oh,
who look
yeah.
actual musicians. They've got they're talking about preamps. What's that? Things like and like they're like listing the names of synthesizers by codes, and they're getting excited by, oh, I've forgotten the name of the little thing, the trash 80s like little sequencer
M8.
thing. Yeah, the M8 people all came in and they were just like, there's all these patches and stuff they're talking about, and like, that's amazing. That's great. Like, why would you not want to be excited by that? Like,
Oh,
and why would
yeah.
you not want to share it into that? But at the same time, it sometimes does make you feel like, oh, but I'm just a little baby over here with my little, I'm just Ableton over here. But
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely screw yourself up mentally by trying to compare yourself to, other people's abilities, which, I mean, I think you can do that in life in general, but, eh, I think there's just a lot of parallels with the Weekly Beats experience that can be applied to other areas of life, just
yeah,
the mental game.
absolutely. Like, one thing which I'm, oh, I'm into like, I came out of like art college, and that side of things is when I was in university, studied fine art and like video and all sorts. And then it's like, well, how do you actually apply this in your life? And it's not necessarily even talent, I would say. This is the thing. It's about being able to apply yourself to something and think about why you're doing that thing there. And this is something which
Mhm.
like, this is why like my tracks all have artwork to go with them, and or not all of them. They used to. 2024, I said I wouldn't do that because I was burning out. But it goes to like, this is why a track should have a name, and a track should have a name because that gives it a certain weight, and that weight of
Yeah.
the track, or the weight of that name that you give the track, informs anyone listening to it. Kind of, it gives them like a little scene setter, a little taste. Like there's no lyrics in
Yeah.
the vast majority of these, so what's going to give someone the taste of what I'm thinking about or what you're thinking about when you're delivering this audio experience to them? And
Yeah.
like, thinking about that actually can gloss over the fact that I forgot to like turn on the hi-hat channel when I was mixing down, like,
Yeah.
or like there's just a massive glitch in there somewhere, or like, I don't know, I changed key on my, like, at the wrong point and it doesn't sound good for like 5 seconds. That
Yeah.
goes away. That all just disappears because you've kind of thought about the rest of it as a gestalt, a thing, a whole. So
Yeah.
that's probably the
And
biggest
you
word I'm going to use today. So,
Gestalt.
gestalts.
That is very art school of you.
Yeah.
Uh, but I do wanna talk about your artwork projects because you were nice enough to send me an entire care package of all of this amazing art you've made.
You got the full set.
The full set,
Yeah.
the collector's edition with stickers and everything, and thank you so much for sending that. I was like, "This is so fucking cool." Tell me, like, because 'cause you're obviously talented at making music and super talented at making these illustrations. Tell me a little bit about just how this art and music project came together. That is a lot to commit to doing every week, and I understand why you got burnt out.
Yeah.
But, like, how did that come about?
Well, one, thank you. It just kind of is. It came about because, kind of like almost going back to what I was saying, was that I wanted everything to kind of have like, there's no lyrics to most of what I do. There's
Yeah.
the song title, and then there's the image which I get to portray to you. And also, I come from like the generation where I would go and buy CDs, and I'd go buy singles, and I'd go like look at records every week when I was in
Yeah.
like high school, secondary school, and
The physical media age.
yeah, I love physical media. Like I
Yeah.
still buy physical media occasionally. There's like a wall of vinyl records behind me, which you can't see on my camera, but they're there. Promise.
I have a ton back here too, so
Yes. And although I have realized that like I've got a drawer full of CDs and I don't have a CD player in the house anymore. So
Same.
anyway, there we go. We've got to fall on some swords occasionally, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just that I want music to be more than what you hear. I need that image to go along with it to tell me something about what it is I'm listening to, or like what the artistic intent of that thing
Yeah.
is. And also, at the time, I just wanted practice. I wanted practice for my portfolio. I wanted practice for just getting the reps in with like the work which I was doing at the time. Like I mentioned, like my day job is like design and working like through Illustrator and being creating in that way. And I needed a way to not be drawing user interfaces, and I needed to be
Yeah.
drawing other things as well. And I do a lot of like book publishing work and layout work in my role, or I had done
Okay.
anyway in the past. And
So you, like, already had, like, this basket of skills to create these books, but you were using your creative abilities for other people and less interesting things.
pretty much, yeah, I was like laying out manuals and things for people, and
Yeah.
which is, actually something I get a weird kick out of. I really do love a good piece of documentation, but yeah. So when you open up like a new like synthesize like the Korg manual, and you unfold it, and it's this just thing, and it's Japanese on one side and
Yeah.
English on the other. You're just like, hey, I'm gonna have fun with this. But it's something. It's about getting like weekly pizzas. It's about getting like the reps in for like what you want to do and what you want to achieve.
Yeah.
And I was learning to use Illustrator at the time because I'd always been like quite a Photoshop heavy and
Mhm.
like that kind of creator, and like I needed to learn Illustrator for my current role. And I was like, okay, well, I'll just use it every week and I'll just figure out as I go. And they're both like Illustrator and like uh Ableton, they're kind of the same tool, really. They're infinite possibilities, but you have to figure out how you want to use them.
Yeah.
So that's what I was doing. And then I guess what happened was that I just did too many of them. And I was like, well, about 10 weeks into the first 2016, I was like, still playing gigs at the time. And I was like, well, I need merch and I need stuff to make people remember me. Why don't I do a series of trading cards? And I started turning them into trading card, like the artworks into like little mini
Sweet.
single things. And I found like a printer to do them. So I was like figuring out like the weights and the GSM of all the paper. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do 10 of these. And the printer who I was using were just really weirdly excited the fact that I wanted to do this dumb project with them, because I wasn't printing that many of them. I was playing like dive bar shows. But then
Yeah.
what I would do is just like put out all these like trading cards on like the merch table, and then a couple of like CDRs, and then I'd put just like this honesty jar down, and I made way more money than I ever would have if I charged like £5 a CD. It was just like, there's an honesty box,
Awesome.
just put some money in there, because I'm not dealing with selling you a single trading card or a sticker
Right,
or a
yeah.
badge as well.
Yeah, that's cool.
And that was like kind of the just that then became, by the time I'd finished the first year, I was like, well, I've got 52 artworks now. I wonder if I could kickstart a book. And I did. And I was like, well, I gotta remaster all this artwork now. So I spent better part of the next year remastering everything that I had done so that it would actually print well at like 22 centimeters. So it's the same size as a CD single, a vinyl single. So,
Yeah.
but
And the illustrations that are more tied to the music, are those created at the same time you're making the music, or is that sort of like after you make the music, you're like, "Here's kinda what that music looks like to me?"
that's a good question. Sometimes I'm working. It usually hits about halfway through the track when I start sketching out ideas for it. So I keep like being an art guy. I've got like sketchbooks everywhere. There's one next to me now with like my notes on for this, and like it's got doodles in it. And I usually keep that next to me while I'm writing the music. And it's like, what am I going for? And also writing down like, this is an A minor, and then it goes to G, because I also need to do that,
Okay.
because otherwise I forget what I'm doing. But it's all kind of like mixed into the sketches and like my notes for the track of like, what is this going to be? Or am I seeing like this is another geometric sort of like vibe of like colors and shapes,
Yeah.
or like kind of, does it remind you of a tattoo, or is it a planet? Is it a spaceship going through the stars? Is it
Yeah.
like how do I want the title to be presented if this was like the title screen from a movie? Like how would this work as a piece? So that does go into it. Occasionally it doesn't. Occasionally it's just like, right, track's done. What's the art? Pictures of bears. Here we go.
Yeah, yeah. Speed
But
trash, as
even,
they say.
yeah, just go. Do it.
Alright, but it sounds like for a lot of these, like, you're thinking about almost as if this is like a finished released product of like, here's the music, here's the visuals that have kind of come together along with it, and like all these things are kind of melding and morphing until like the music's finished, the artwork is finished, and like it's a complete idea.
Yeah, yeah. Or at least be along the way to being a complete idea by the time like I hit mix down and like save that mix down. And then as soon as that's like burning through, it's like the art programs are open, Illustrator's open, the square is there, and I always stick in the same square, same like 3000 by 3000 pixel like template, which is ready to go. All my presets are there in Illustrator, ready to go, and start creating. Usually, it starts with like, what's the title of this thing? Because I often don't
Mhm.
have a title until like the end or towards the end, or
Yeah, I'm terrible with titles.
it's fun. I think it's the best bit. You get to name this thing that you've just brought into the world.
It it's the my most hated part of the process, which is
Oh yeah,
usually why I just have the M8 name it for me. I'm like, "Yeah, that looks good,"
yeah.
because I just, like, stress over what I should call this thing.
I think definitely sometimes I'm sitting back and I'm looking up at my books and I'm looking at around me, and it's just like, is anything gonna inspire me in this room that I've just been in for 8 hours making this thing?
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, really. Usually, I go back to like books or like scribbles and notes and like things and feelings and stuff, and
Yeah.
yeah. Or if I'm angry about something, like what am I angry about? Like usually it's the state of the world, and you can find something in there to title it something.
Yeah, yeah, I feel
So
that. And do you feel like the art creation is similar to music, like, sometimes it goes in a different direction than you visualized initially, and you have to just, like, let it go that way?
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. It's something where I like my partner will stream themselves doing like design work for their job, and it's something which I don't think I could ever do. I don't think I'd ever want to be like that naked out there, just like
Yeah.
watching me just choose a font for half an hour, or like stretching something backwards and forwards, or putting something together and then just deleting it again because I dislike it, or just moving
Mhm.
something over to the side, or like and rotating it around, and it's like you could play it back and it would just be like, what is he doing? I have no idea, and I don't think that has no value. That would give no one anything. I don't think.
Yeah. That's a very raw
Yeah,
look at creation.
and I think if someone did that with like, if they ever saw me making music or something, they would be like, "What are you doing? Like, I don't understand how you get from there to there, and now I've watched you do it, and I still don't understand how you did that." Because I don't understand it half the time. Like half the time, it's just like
Yeah.
you're there
Yeah.
and you're chopping it up, and then somehow you've just got it into this thing, and then it's there. Uh, that flow, I guess, is the thing which you're looking for
Yeah.
all the time. But then you never know how you got there, so you got to try and chase it again. So
Yeah, and then sometimes it's just not coming together, and you gotta put it down.
yeah, and I'd say that that was something that the more you do a weekly beats or something along those lines, the less that happens. The more you can rely on your instincts, and the more you can create, the more that you can just kind of like you've got your ways out. You're creating like all these you're creating opportunities for yourself, and you know where like if I go through these three doors, I can get to that place by doing these things, and I'm stuck, but I know there's a way out because it's over there, and it's just by placing these things in this way, and I can resolve the tension here, and I can pull on that lever again, and like what's that lever? That lever is like drop everything out and then do the acoustic part, or do the spacey bit in the middle, or like
Yeah.
turn all your guitars on and just go heavy for a bit, or anything like that. That those things come more and more natural, and that was the thing which
For
kind of
sure.
pulled me through most of what I was doing in like 2024 was because I had less tools. There wasn't as much I could do physically, but I could still access all of those like tricks that get you
Yeah.
through, the things that kind of resolve your tension. So 2016, absolutely, I was getting stuck all the time. And
Mhm.
then 2018, still getting stuck, but I could unstick myself a little bit and I knew how to work through things. And then like 2022, when I came back after like taking a year out, well, 3 years out, 4 years out. Anyway, time. How does that work?
Yeah, it's weird.
Then it's like, yeah, I can just do this. I can work through these things, and like I felt that it was so consistent nearly all the way through, like maybe to the point of blandness if you would like to listen to it as a whole, but it just I could get through it, and I think that that's the thing that I'd learned again and again was just that you build a new trick and then you get through it and then you try and build new ones along the way so that every time you get stuck you just go into your bag again and you're pulling out something
Yeah.
else. So and those
Yeah,
things
and
are yeah.
I mean, putting in the reps builds up all these tricks, and there's also the mental side of it of just, like, not getting down on yourself if something's not coming together.
Hmm,
Like, maybe I need to go explore sound design stuff because, like, arranging is not working,
exactly.
or,
Yeah.
like, I think the mental game is such a was, for me, a huge learning part from Weekly Beats,
Mm,
uh, of, like, not not getting worried when it felt like things weren't really coming together, like, "Oh, no, I've got this deadline to hit. I don't know that this song is gonna happen," and then when you get into that low point, like, nothing's really gonna happen unless you get back to the place where you can just have fun again.
yeah. And there's other ways of shortcutting that, and that's usually just going, what would someone else do? If I was listening to this
Mm,
track and it was
I like that.
by LCD Sound System, how would they resolve it? Would they resolve it? What would they do in
Yeah,
this situation?
that's cool.
Or straight up, like, I am riffing off stuff I like when I'm making a lot of music. I am thinking about, like, one, what would Trent Reznor do? Like, I have listened to Nine Inch Nails since I was like 12. I love
Yeah,
Nine Inch Nails. What would he do? He's like my hero. I don't know what it would do in his presence.
yeah,
But often it's
but he's
like, don't
certainly got a lot of tricks.
he's got all the tricks and like all of his production tricks, but also like all these other bands are out there and musicians. Like, what would they do to solve that? What would your friend do to solve that problem? When you kind of get out of your head a little bit and into like, how have other people done this? And you're standing on their shoulders, but you're standing on their
Yeah.
shoulders and they're not complaining about you doing it. Like,
No.
it's that like we're there to kind of digest the things we like and put regurgitate them in a way that we express as ourselves, and it will always be different. Like one of the tracks which we will talk about later, I am literally riffing on some of my favorite bands, and it's because they're my favorite band. Why would I not want to try and get into that headspace and figure out what
True.
makes them tick? Like that was
Yeah.
exciting to me. And then I guess the thing that can happen is that you're just looking at your bank of synthesizers, or you're playing the same riffs and the same notes, or you're looking at the stuff that you're doing and you're thinking about, oh, what is there? And it's just like, well, there is a palette out there which you could just go and access at any time. You just need to
Yeah.
tune
That's
into
a
it and
really, really cool way of thinking about getting unstuck and, yeah, taking the stuff that you like and making it your own, borrowing
mm,
tricks, borrowing sounds.
yeah. There's a like even oh, I forgot what it's called. Brian Eno and someone else. Well, I was going to say David Bowie. It probably wasn't David Bowie, but they had these like cards that you could pull like at any point and
Oh,
like
yeah, this has
solve the
come up
creation.
I can't remember the name of the cards, but this has come up before.
Brian
Yeah,
Eno's
these,
fun
like
cards. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But things like that, anything to get you unstuck
Mhm.
is the best way of doing it. They say things like, take the smallest thing and make it the biggest thing. And it's like, okay, how do you do that? So it's like, well, the smallest thing here is that little loop behind there. What if that's the whole track? What if that is
Yeah,
the thing that pulls you through?
yeah.
And yeah, there's so much stuff out there to help you with that thing. But when you're in it, I can completely understand how it feels, because I've been there before, where it's like I'm stuck. I don't know what to do. This is
Well, I mean,
awful.
it takes the reps to learn these things, and, I mean, that's why we all like weekly beats.
Yeah,
It is like, we've seen what the reps do, like, for your creation. Like, you get that process down, you build up a bag of tricks, you end up with a pile of songs at the end of the year.
exactly. And then I don't think. Well, I think anyone should be proud of like what they get out of like though. Like there's just a joyful release by the end of it, or absolute burnout. Not either, but like by the time
Or
you
a
get
little
to
bit of
the end,
both.
yeah, a little bit of both. Like you probably should feel exhausted by it, but and you
Yeah.
should also listen back to a track and go, I have no idea how I did that, and
Mhm.
like that's probably my favorite feeling in the world of listening to like I went back to like 2016 stuff and I was like, I don't know that guy. Who is he? Like,
Yeah.
what was he doing in my house? And why was he doing those things? But they're fine. Like, and then there's other ones where you really remember it and you're just like, oh, I remember I was grinding that track out and I couldn't solve it. And then this was the thing that got it over the line. And I wouldn't do that now, but that was the thing that fixed it. So
Yeah. Well, let's listen to some of this music.
let's
We're
go.
gonna start out with Press Hold Death, which is your final song from 2024. Let's go.
Let's do it.
that was Press Hold Death. Obviously, I think there's something special about the final song of A Weekly Beats Year. Like, at least mine, when I go back and listen to it, this journal concept has come up many times on this show, but it feels like a a big release and also a little bit of like, I can't believe I made that. Like, I really like that one.
Mm.
And this one feels to me like a really good end cap to the year. And also, I mean, just an epic like compilation of your song making skills. Like, it's a long song.
It's a big one. It's a big one.
But damn, is it good?
I think the most important thing is when you're dealing with like tracks that are long, is that they can't be boring. And or if they are boring, there's got to have a reason for it being boring almost.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
like if you're dealing with repetition and you're dealing with like slow, like evolving soundscapes, absolutely. Be 20 minutes long, be 30 minutes long. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing that you're exploring. But when you're exploring like a track as a thing, you want to keep it exciting and you want to keep going. And that was the thing that is kind of like part of like the way I compose things anyway, is I kind of just start and then I'll see where that goes. And then I get to a point and I see where that goes for a bit. And then this was one of those tracks where, well, for one thing, I'd started it a couple of weeks before. So I had that intro section because I noted down here because I logged into my live and I was using a new plugin to find some weird sounds. And it was one called
Sweet.
Serato Hex FX, which I no longer have access to because it was just the demo. So it just sits there in perpetuity now.
A moment in time.
It is. But that was what I was playing with, and it was that like putting those synths through it at the beginning was kind of giving it that sort of reverb and the texture that was in there. And then I think I'd kind of got on board of like that in that where it got to, and that's where I had taken the chords and chopped them into like individual kind of like pulses, and then I used those pulses to then drive the next part of the track. And that was where I was like, okay, we've got to go for it this time. Like, what is this track about? And it was, for me, it was about like travel, because I was literally traveling at the time. It was just me on my laptop, and me and my partner were in Japan of all places, and traveling around. And I wanted to capture just like that pace of not just like
Yeah.
the city life, that kind of arty wank, which happens occasionally, but also just that feeling of like you're transitioning between places, and then you're in a new place, and then you're in another place, and then you're in another
Yeah.
place, and like kind of you're exhausted by it, but you're just having a blast doing it at the same time. So yeah, that's kind of
Yeah. I now that you say that, like, this does capture that sort of like newness of travel. Like, you're never really staying in one place in the song for too long. And, there's that feeling when you travel of like things are new and the days sort of feel longer and like
mm.
everything's kind of exciting, even kind of boring stuff because you're traveling. And then one area of like sound design that sticks out for me is like around the 7-minute mark. There's like this really awesome sounding bass line. So I wanted to ask how you made that.
So it's a layering of a load of stuff. So that bit goes into the parts I was talking earlier about being inspired by stuff. And in 2024, according to Spotify, my most listened artist was Tangerine Dream. And I was just endlessly listening to Tangerine Dream because I was listening to it in work, and they they rule. It's great. It just gets you through the day. It's that perfect sort of like background noise, but not too complex to
Mhm.
thing, and it goes into this like part where you've got the sort of like sine wavy synths and things like that, and then I knew that this needed like some crunch into it to lead up, because once you've kind of got to 7 minutes into a track, you're in it for the long haul. You're gonna have to go back to
Yeah.
being big at
Yeah.
some point. Like you're gonna have to get there, and the whole track itself actually kind of inverts itself, and it basically plays exactly what you heard almost in reverse towards the end. It just
Oh,
does it
okay.
faster. So bringing in that big grinding synth, I think it is probably just a preset which I just started messing with in Ableton.
I love it.
Is my I'm in the track. I'm here. Here we go. This is live James digging around what it is. So 7 minutes in, we have got 3 bass lines playing at once, and they're
Oh,
all playing the
sweet.
same thing. So the main one is one called Bass on the Road, which is probably just a preset, which I've messed with the cutoffs and the resonance of. And then there are 2 synths underneath it playing the same thing, but they're the lead synths pitched right back down,
Oh,
so that you
okay.
kind of get that the reverb and the kind of like the space in it. So the
Yeah.
space is coming from like almost like plucked strings, but really deep in there. So
I've been doing this more lately as well, of, like, taking the same essentially MIDI sequence and just, like, layering a bunch of different patches on top of each other.
yeah, I do that all the time. It's like one of my
Yeah.
favorite tricks in the book is to just say, well, what if that was played on something else? And what if that was like, what if you take
Yeah.
the same synth patch, but you have 2 slightly different versions of it? You duplicate the tracks and then you pitch them slightly on it left and right, and it just
Yeah.
creates this world of sound which you're listening to that it 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 doesn't make much difference, but it's like the little things within it just mean it's more interesting to listen to, if you will.
Yeah. Well, and I notice you do another thing that I like to do is take the same synth line and sort of just, like, pass it to a different instrument in a different part of the song. So
Yeah.
it's, like, it's still familiar. You're not reinventing the entire musical phrase. You're maybe changing a few things, but, like, hearing it in a different way.
Yeah. That's again, it's something which one thing which I actually do quite a lot is if I'm playing or like Ableton's great because you can turn things into MIDI, and playing in the
Oh,
notes that
yeah.
you want to play on your guitar, or you've got a melody in your head, so you hum it into your microphone or something, and then turn that into MIDI, and then see what it sounds like when you bounce it between things after you've fixed it, because it's never perfect, or sometimes it's not perfect in a fun way. But
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty cool.
um, it's really great for creating like a synth solo or something, or like you can track in a guitar and then say, hey, play that on like my lead synth, or play that on marimbas, or play that in whatever you want it to do, and then use that as kind of the lead instead of the guitar, and then the guitar becomes back in the mix.
That's
Stuff like
cool.
that.
I have never messed with that Ableton, like, MIDI conversion thing before.
It doesn't work well, but it works it just how you need it to. So
It works some kinda way. Alright, we're gonna keep it moving with Cults of Symmetry 3 and 4, and this is from week 51 of 2022. We are gonna kind of work our way backwards through the years and kind of explore your weekly beats evolution in reverse order.
yeah, this is like the Memento way of doing it.
Yeah, for sure. I love that movie, by the way. All right, here we go. All right, that was Cult of Symmetry 3 and 4 from 2022. So, as you were going back, picking tracks and listening to years past, what stuck out about this one?
So this one is kind of like the biggest way I could think of ending a year for 2022. I was already feeling like I just can't do this. How am I going to finish this? And then I was like, I just do it in the biggest way I could possibly do it, by writing essentially a 20-minute long musical, which was instrumental and is got this mad concept to it or something. And this is like the middle track of it. So what I did for the end of 2022 was I was actually going away traveling again over Christmas, and like I knew I was not going to have access to everything which I had. So I was like, in the run up to it, I was like, okay, I'm going to just track everything I possibly can into one track that will do me for 3 weeks and kind of cheat the end of it by doing 3 times the work at the beginning stage.
Yeah.
So I wrote the last 3 tracks were all written in one big section, and then I started
Wow.
working on like when the transition points would be. So the basic mix and everything was kind of done and dusted by the time I released like the first part of this. And it kind of so this one was like the middle part of the trilogy, the Empire Strikes Back, if you will, of the whole thing. And it was just the bit where everything had, a bit like with the previous track, you're propulsing along on a journey, you're telling a story, you're kind of driving ahead with these, you've almost laid down the textures and the ideas in your first track, and
Yeah.
those first I think the first track is like 7 minutes long as well. So the first 7 minutes, you're just like laying down the ideas. The tracks are all there. The like Ableton is all like cooking up. It's got everything in it. And now all you have to do is take that and keep going with it. So how do
Yeah.
you do that?
Yeah.
And this one was just where everything was just firing on all cylinders. It was just like, okay, right, I've got a sort of like a synth wave post rock thing going on here. How can I keep that going? And what is interests me about like synth wave and synth rock and things like that? And it's like, well, it's gotta have a solo in it. And then it just kind of does at halfway point. And I was like, I think that's the most kick-ass thing I've ever written. I still think it is. I think it's like my like a high point where I was just like, I have no idea like how I did that. Like I wrote it, all of this 20 minutes in about a week and a bit.
Wow.
And there was just this point where you're just going for it. And I was like, okay, right, I need to have the drums need to be like hitting in this certain way, and then you need to hit this like high point with the where the guitars come back in with this like lead line, and then you need to like kind of like break it back down, but then reference everything that came before it. So the lines are actually following the same pattern again, but they're playing them on different instruments. There's a flute solo in there somewhere. Not that I can play the flute, but I was just messing with something. And yeah, it just felt like such a high point to go out of the year on it. And then the final week is kind of like the resolution to the whole thing. And I had this
Got
whole
it.
idea in my head that this would be like a kind of short film or something where you're trying to express like all these ideas that are going on. Like, what if there was a weird scientific death cult that accidentally destroys the universe? What would that be like? And that was the whole thing. And
Man,
yeah, it was.
you really have a knack for uh making really long songs that are not boring, but it's super cool to hear your process of how you're taking these initial ideas. And like you said, I'm reusing a lot of the same patterns in a different way. So like there's like I guess that's what makes it feel like everything is still tied together. It's not like a completely different song, but it keeps moving.
Exactly, yeah. And it's, you have like working at those kind of extreme lengths, I would say, you do have to reference things. And I don't think you notice it as a listener that it's happening as often as it actually is happening.
Yeah.
Like there's like a like motifs and things like that. It's kind of like basic music theory, but I don't know music theory, so I just kind of do it naturally, or just like kind of have learnt it
Yeah.
through osmosis somewhere else. But like there's like a little riff which is in the first part of the song, which is like the
That
week
carries
before,
through.
and then it's suddenly played modulating over the chords in this track, and then the guitar solo is kind of playing off that again, and then when it breaks down into just kind of like the kind of verse of that section, then it's still playing things which are along those lines,
Yeah.
but just in slightly different ways, and is like kind of modulated keys and things a little bit, but it never changes that much. And that keeps you interested. I think that keeps you kind of going throughout the whole thing. And then the final part of that track is the final bit where I actually change the tempo of it, because the first two sections are in like the same tempo. And I was like, oh, how do I make this different? I was just like, oh, I'll just crank it up a bit and just see what happens there. And yeah, then it ends.
Yeah, and I think it took me a whole year of making songs to really understand that you don't have to reinvent the wheel in a
No.
song. Like,
Yeah.
like, it's not a bad thing to reuse a melody or reuse a part of a melody and change the sound of it, and actually it's better to sort of rob from the ideas in that song than to come up with completely new ones.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you listen to like your favorite band, they would
Yeah.
probably still sound the same as they used to. And if they didn't, you probably had some opinions about it when they changed sound, for better
Yeah,
or worse.
yeah, yeah.
But s- like you will have your own, and you will, by doing this process you will learn. We talked about tricks, and we also talked about like the sounds you like and the melodies you like.
Mm,
And what's the band, Health, the sort of like industrial rock kind of
yeah.
new metal-y noise
Mhm.
band. The vocal styling of that, the guy sings the same way. He sings the same melodies sometimes, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a great
Yeah.
thing, because that means it sounds like Health. That means it sounds like within their world, and then they have like their own sound palette,
Or,
and
like,
you can
another
just
one that comes to mind is Future Islands.
yeah, yeah. Oh, and he's
Like,
got
the way
such
he
a
sings, it's like, uh actually, I went to a show last year, a Future Island show, and I was like, I would have thought this guy was, like, from Germany or something, but he's, like, from North Carolina,
yeah.
but he like, the way his vocal styling and the melodies and the song structure, like, it's very much them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing that makes them them, and it's the thing that
Yeah,
makes you you, and the thing
yeah,
that makes me me. Is And I think when you bury deep on those things and feel confident in repeating yourself, that's actually probably one of the points where you go from like I'm messing about with music to almost being a musician, I guess.
mhm,
Which I would never call
yeah.
myself, but I was always
No,
just like,
me either.
that's the bit where that transition point lies, is the confidence to reference yourself and reference the things
Yeah,
that you think work and the things that you enjoy about music and the
yeah.
things that you make, which is like why I think that you should be your biggest fan almost. That
Yeah, there's a bit of confidence to be like, "This melody's so good, I'm gonna reuse it, like, 5 times
oh yeah,
and change the instruments and add layers," and yeah.
yeah. Who's gonna call you out on it?
No one.
And if they do,
Uh,
they're a jerk.
it's true, it's true, and they're not on Weekly Beats, and they're
And they're
probably
not,
not
no.
making any music themselves.
Exactly.
Alright, we're gonna keep it rolling to 2018, the International Library. Here we go. That was the International Library from week 7 of 2018. So, as you listen back to 2018, what do you notice is different than, say, 2024?
With these ones, it was a lot more about, I think I was still trying to find like what I really enjoyed about certain sounds in like 2018. It's just coming, like this was like coming off 2016. I'd kind of reached a point, like there's a point in most of these in weekly beats, and I guess it was the first year for you, wasn't it? 2024
Yeah,
was
it
the
was,
yeah.
yeah.
You're, I don't know, you're not me, but I guess I find that the last like 10 tracks or something of a weekly beats or something like that are kind of the ones where you're cooking and you're like
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you've done it, you're on the thing, the nights are drawing in, and like you've got the time and space to just kind of be reflecting and pursuing back like exactly what you want to do. But then when you start again, you are starting again, so you're back at week 1. And I
Yeah.
think this track in particular was one of the ones where I'd kind of locked back in on what I had done in 2016 and had kind of like gotten back into the groove a little bit, and also was still like able to like explore something else as well. So that was the thing that was kind of driving this track, and it's full of the same sounds that I would use because it's the same setup. It's a lot of pocket operator in this one. So what it is a lot of I think it's the factory one, little orange guy,
Mhm.
and playing that and then putting it through this sampler, which I've completely forgotten the name of, but it's like a BT glitch creator where basically a load of glitches are all over the MIDI keyboard. So you just kind of play your samples in and then just hold a key and it just does something else with it, and you're just like, okay, that sounds cool, and then you render that down and
Yeah.
then use that as the body of the track. So that is like kind of chiming throughout this whole thing, which is something I probably wouldn't do now. Like, one, pocket operators are kind of dead, but they don't seem to work anymore, but that kind of like almost like that randomness I probably wouldn't do as much, but it really benefits this track. And what I was trying to do with this one was kind of create I'm trying to think of the type of music. It's like, is it Balearic house music? Like that kind of Ibiza sort of lead sort of lines in it, like
Mhm.
chicane and stuff like that from like the 90s, late 90s sort of sound. And then like what happens if that crashed into new metal, which is exactly what happened in my life. Was that I was into dance music for a bit and then I got into Limp Bizkit, and what does that actually sound like in someone's head? So that's
Yeah.
kind of what I was going for with it.
Yeah, so, like, week 7 is like, "Alright, I'm, like, back to making music weekly." I'm, like, getting this figured out.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm still trying to figure out what my sound is like for the year, so I'm kinda using stuff from last year.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's like, what new things are in your head? Because surely, like, you spend, well, the intervening year, you're filling your head with new stuff and new ideas, and you might still be making music. Or like you had a 1-0 on there who's just kept going,
Oh,
and it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
that's incredible. I don't think
Incredible.
I could, because I need
No.
to kind of recharge and refill with new
Yeah.
thoughts and new ideas and new.
I'm just now starting to get back into making music in the off year while also running this
Mm,
show, but I'm trying to do so in a way where it's like, it's okay for me to, like, sit on the same song idea for a long time, like, not to feel like I have to, like, finish this thing and move on immediately. Like, it's okay if I, like, come
take a
back
week.
and
Yeah,
add a melody, or if it takes a month, who
yeah.
cares, you know?
I think I've fundamentally broken that part of myself. I think I'd have to do it in a week now.
I guess that's what happens after so many weekly beats years is, like, you just gotta finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, coming back to like, I feel like I don't do much in the off years. Like I try and fill myself with like other creative works. So
Yeah.
like I do other things. I focus on like my job, focus on running and like fitness and
Yeah.
all the life stuff which you have to do as you get older,
Yeah.
which sucks. But it's good in a way because those are all opportunities to kind of like listen to something new or kind of like experience what's going on outside of that, and then coming back in, you can start feeding all of that new raw material into
Yeah.
something else. So
Yeah. Or, maybe I should use the off year for just more like wacky experimentation that I don't release.
yeah, yeah, why
Yeah.
not? Or like get a new synth and figure out exactly what it does, or get into
Oh,
modular synths and lose yourself for more
let's
than
not
a
do
year.
that.
I think that's a step too far for me.
Yeah. Get into modular synths and lose your house maybe,
Yeah.
because you can't afford anything. Alright, we're gonna keep going and move on to 2016, week 50, When Your Heart Is Lost to Stars. That was When Your Heart Is Lost to Stars from your first year of Weekly Beats, towards the very end. What
Almost there.
what made this one stand out to you?
So I wanted to highlight this one mostly as if anyone has followed what I do from like weekly beats, is that at some point I learned how to use this horn patch in Ableton, and this was that track where I figured it out. And I I it's weird that it was not part of like my palette of sounds before then, really, and I don't know why it wasn't. But at some point, I writing this one, I knew I was like, it was a 2016 was just like a horrible kind of cold but miserable winter in the UK, and I was like,
Ugh.
I want to make something like Vangelis, and I went ahead and was like, well, what makes Vangelis Vangelis? And Vangelis is all synth strings and synth horns and fake sounds that sound great. And hand on heart, I just like went, okay, how do I do that? What would make a sort of Vangelis-esque piece of music? And that was this. And then I liked the horn patch so much that I saved it as a preset, and it pretty much comes up not every time I do a track, but from then on, like it's in there, and it's nearly all the time that I will be relying on this kind of honk that it makes.
And still now, even from 2016, like, this is part of your bag of tricks?
Absolutely. Yeah, I use it all the time. It was
Awesome.
in a few tracks in 2024, like I can't name them because I can't remember which ones, but it's definitely there. Yeah. It's just like it is just a synth patch ultimately. It's just from typing horn in the Ableton search thing, and then I layered it with I had like effects racks that I was using for the guitar, and by putting those guitar effects racks onto the sort of like horn sound, you just get this huge noise, and that's what you're going for. Like this is very clearly one a tribute to Vangelis, but it is a sort of looking up at the stars song, and you need to just kind of every sound needs to just sound like it's in space, and that's how
Yeah.
you do it. It's just like there is an amp, there is a delay, there is another delay, there is a reverb, there is probably a third delay on that, and then it's layered over like several tracks, so it's playing the same thing on slightly different tuned horns and honks
Got
and things
it.
like that. And then you also have that the sort of like deep sine wave, not sine wave, like square wave bass underneath it, which is just kind of that growl of like the infinite, which you get when you're meant to be looking up at the stars. So yeah, that's this track.
So, I mean, even in even in 2016, uh, you had the skills to make these, like, big, epic sounding tracks. Is that
I
something
think
that you developed in 2016, or you kind of had that from your other musical endeavors prior?
I think it kind of 2016 was when I learned how to articulate that. I think there's definitely a few tracks where I was figuring out what that kind of sound is. It's a very like No Man's Sky kind of like what is sci-fi but vibrant sort of color. What
Ooh,
does
that's a
that
good way to
sound
put it.
like? And obviously, there's like the soundtrack to No Man's Sky, which is a great soundtrack. It's by 65 Days of Static, one of my favorite bands before then already. So I was already like in tune with what that is. But yeah, there was definitely a few moments where it was like I think moving to Ableton enabled me to kind of like see what that music would look like. And a lot of the time, like with
Mm.
chiptune and things like that, and what I'd been doing beforehand, you're kind of like you're in a room, you want to write music that makes people dance or makes people want to kind of move themselves. So you're playing with like 4/4 beats, you're playing with like drum, like almost drum and bass kind of like things occasionally, and you're kind of like it's all about motion and it's all about kind of like movement and repetition and things like that. And that doesn't necessarily lead to kind of that more like stargazy and shoegazy kind of
Yeah.
experience. So by moving into Ableton and being able to see what I was doing and being inspired by those things, like I remember the room I was in at the time had a big star chart on the wall, and yeah, and all things like that. And that kind of led to that exploration of what that sound is and how it works.
And when you say I can see what I'm doing in Ableton, what do you mean by that?
I guess like what I was doing before was very much just like small blocks of MIDI sound in a sequencer. And I kind of need that visual to like kind of show me what this track is almost looking like. Like my tracks look like these big they're going along, but then they're kind of like going like this down with the numbers of tracks that I'm adding in. So it's kind of like a
Got it. It's like
triangle.
you can visually see the layers that you're building.
Yeah, and when you like look at a drum loop or something, I need to see what that drum loop looks like in my head. Weirdly, Rock Band helped me become a better drummer because like learn how drums actually work because you could see them, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh
Yeah.
right, you don't have to put the kick on the 4 every time. You could put the kick in other places, and you could do this other kind of drum beat. So I now have like 2 drum beats that I now use all the time rather than one. So being able to like kind of see and visualize and also be able to like go in microscopically and say, okay, in this bit I need to ramp everything up, and you literally ramp everything up at that point when you've got your volume and on your automations and things. And I want to
Yeah.
change that sound, so how am I doing it? So you just bring up the automation lane for it and you draw how you want that to change over time. That is the kind of thing that really um
Got it.
that really helps me because I'm not a
So
yeah.
a true visual component to your music making.
Absolutely. It makes up for the fact that I can't play music very fast with my own fingers, is that
Yeah,
I
yeah.
have to see what it's doing on the screen.
Yeah, like, I kind of get the visual thing, like, I do most of my music making on the M8, and since it's, essentially a spreadsheet of characters, when I, like when I can see the song progressing, it's a different experience than if I, like, close my eyes and listen to the song because then I'm, like,
Mm,
not anticipating this next section that I can visually see that it's gonna move to and just, like, listen to the sounds. But
yeah,
making and arranging, I find that visual aspect really helpful to, like, kinda like you were saying, seeing the different blocks and, like, how they fit together and what blocks can be reused and maybe an instrument changed.
yeah, yeah, and it's kind of like I've tried using trackers and things before. I tried LSDJ and even like the one on Nanoloop, and Nanoloop is quite a visual little program, really. It's blocks, but you should tell. And there's people out there who can make amazing stuff with it. It just doesn't click with me. It just does.
Got it,
I
yeah.
can't like kind of figure out how I can articulate myself without kind of like seeing what I'm doing on the screen. And
And is it like seeing the actual waveforms to you?
I don't think it's like seeing about the waveforms. It's literally just seeing the like the tracks and the blocks
Got
and
it.
what that's supposed to do when it's supposed to do it. And like, okay, I know there's no drums here because the drum track is not on right there. And
Yeah, yeah, I see, yeah.
like you can then start going in and saying, okay, well, I know what beat that's going at because I can see how rhythmic it is, and I can see that the bass is kicking along with that beat and
Got
things like
it.
that. And
Yeah,
with the guitar waves and things like that, you can tell how you're building up and going down with it, with the with
yeah,
the audio WAV tracks and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool. Well, we we have exhausted your picks. I am gonna get in a couple of my picks from 2024. My first one is week 18 from 2024, Challenger. Okay, that was Challenger. I picked this one, you know, it's like a great danceable track, just like fat bass. I don't know, it's just a great vibe and wanted to highlight it and make sure that other people heard it.
Awesome. I mean, this was one when you picked it, I was like, I don't know what I have to say about this track. This was definitely one of the things where I had to get something done, and it got done. That was the main goal for this one.
Yeah.
I think I was riffing off, and the title is probably because that film, is it Challengers, came out, or the one about the tennis people that Trent Reznor, Drink Again if you were following, did the soundtrack for, and it had that sort of like 90s dance anthem sort of
Yeah.
vibe throughout it, that Euro dance thing. And I was just like, well, I got to do something this week, so this is what you're getting. And I went in and had a look at the live track for this one, and to my surprise, there's only about 8 tracks in it in total, which is, for me, this is minimal. So
You like to stack the tracks for sure.
yeah, I love a good stack of tracks. And I think a lot of it was done through automation. So that whole like pulsing intro, and it's just changing over time, and it's literally just going into the synth presets and just whacking them up and bringing out the harmonics in it and
Yeah.
changing that over time, but letting them sit as the beats come in and stuff. So it's definitely a fun track.
Since you do stack a ton of tracks, what do you do to keep things from sounding like it's a stack of tracks?
One thing I do is at the mixing stage, I learnt to not sum things together, but group things together, like similar sounding things, particularly, and like put a mastering bus on those. So I
Mm.
don't know if you're supposed to do this, by the way. I like this is not
I'm not gonna correct
create
you
digital.
either
This
way,
is
so
not create digital music. This is not Future Music Magazine or anything coming at me or anything which I've learned. But I kind of felt that once I figured out that I could group tracks together. So, for instance, like if you've got 8 channels of chiptune going on in a track, which I often do, if you sum all of those together or you like kind of group them together, you can put a mastering plugin on that whole chunk and
got
kind of
it.
blend them together, like almost do a sub mix of it, which is, I guess, what someone professional might do. I'm going to pretend that they
That
do
sounds
that, and I
legit to
sound it.
me, so
Yeah, it sounds pretty legit. So, like, there's a EQ and there's like a mastering plugin on just like a little portion of the track. And then when I actually come to master the whole thing and mix the whole thing, I'm not mixing the whole every single one of those tracks. I'm mixing the chunks of them. So I've kind of funneled it
got
down a little
it.
bit. And then another mastering plugin goes on top, which is a lot like harsher, which is the thing that kind of like lifts everything out of the mud at the end, I guess.
I mean, that makes sense because it's like, here's a group of tracks that are all sort of like in the same realm, and mixing them together, if some of them get lost with each other, that's fine because they like they fit together.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cause yeah,
Yeah,
like
exactly. We're talking about we were talking about like that bass earlier in the other
yeah,
track, and
yeah,
it's like, well, there's 4 things playing that same bass line. It doesn't matter that I can't pick them out individually. What matters is the whole of that sound at that point,
exactly.
and that's how it gets mixed. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Cause like, listening to your songs, I like, I wouldn't think that there's, like, 40 tracks on some of these, like, the it everything fits together.
2024 was a leaner year.
Okay,
Maxed out
okay.
at 20.
Still though, I'm mostly dealing with, like, 8 tracks over here, so, 20 tracks is just, like, mind-blowing to me. So, well, we have come to the end of the show. So, my last song that I wanna play is called "Freelancer" from week 15 of 2024, and I picked this one because it's, like, completely different than your other songs, and I always like to showcase, like, the breadth of abilities when I pick songs, and I think this one, it's, like, pretty much mainly a guitar track with some drums. The drums on here made me wonder if you are actually a drum player, because I think your drums are really solid, but maybe that's your training on Guitar Hero.
It is Rock Band 2, learning to play like Paramore and stuff on there. That's pretty much that's pretty much where I learned all my drums from, doing "Carry On My Wayward
Nice,
Son" on there.
nice.
On
Uh
medium, not even on hard.
so, like, when you were creating this one, what what made you kinda wanna create this one that's sort of very much out of the synthwave realm and do, like, a, like, straight up guitar track?
So, with this one, I'd just been to see one of my favorite bands, which is Placebo, and they literally play like this. This is an absolute homage to that sound. And the best way to kind of explore some like artist sounds is try and like understand how they write songs and how their
Yeah.
like music works. So for this, they use a really strange tuning. So I actually wrote it down for the music kids out there. This is tuning your guitar up, so it's at like F sharp, B flat, E flat, G sharp, and then the rest of the strings are at C. So that's a very strange tuning for me, anyway.
Yeah.
Like
That's
I'm a drop D
strange.
guy,
Oh,
so
yeah. Oh, yeah.
like, and the main thing was if you tune your guitar that way, you will just write a placebo song. That's kind of like the rules. It seems like that's kind of how it seems to work. And there's definitely one. So if your listeners out there go and listen to one called "Days Before You Came," it is basically this song because it's in that tuning, and I could not get out of it. When I was writing this track, I was just like, I can't lose what that song is because it sounds like this. But even then,
Got it.
trying to figure out how that works and how to manipulate that into like verse chorus verse kind of style, that's still a difficult songwriting technique to do. And also you're trying to work with, like, I mainly work with instrumental songs, and I wanted to just play with different sounds and things. So in 2024 there was like going back to like rock music, and I've played in a rock band before. It's very fun, but getting back to that kind of like songwriting in that mode is difficult when
Yeah.
you're like um yeah. And what I did was I tracked the guitars a little bit like how we were talking about, like summing them together and like duplicating them to get that kind of 90s guitar feel. You're dealing with guitars which aren't particularly distorted in a lot of their ways, but what you have to do is then play the same thing, slightly different amp settings, and then pitch it to different sides again, and it makes your
Mm.
guitars sound wider, but keeps
Yeah.
the kind of like the pace and the rhythm of everything going. So
Cool.
yeah, it was a great fun track to just kind of whoosh out in a couple of like, I think it was a couple of evenings for this one, and it really helped me just kind of understand how they write their songs, which is great.
Yeah.
Like I love learning that kind of stuff, and it was kind of my ethos of like 2024. It was like, if something says, "Hey, why not do that?" I was just going to do it and just explore it. So it was good
Cool.
fun.
Yeah, I mean, that is a really good way to get into the head of some of your favorite artists, is try to capture what makes them them.
Yeah, it turns out it's exactly that tuning, though. I promise
That
anyone
that'll get
that
you there.
that'll get anyone there. Just like put a bit of like a little bit of delay on it. Like there's the guitars are so raw in it. It's just like a bit of gain and then a bit of delay, and you're there. It's great. Probably the hardest thing was actually doing the bass line for it, because the bass is a pitched down guitar because I don't have a bass guitar anymore. So I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
how can I do a bass line? I was like, oh, just play it and then pitch it down and see what happens, and it
That's
just
a good
happened to
idea.
kind of work. Yeah, but
Cool. Well, we're gonna let people hear this one in a second. Uh, Thanks again for joining, and really cool to check out more of your work.
thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciated like all of the podcasts which you've been doing, and it's an honor to like talk to people about it. I'm usually quite quiet on like all of the like the discords and the on the like comments and stuff. It's usually just because I'm busy most of the time.
Yeah.
It's not because I'm aloof. You could just bother me anywhere. It turns out you could just say talk to me and I will. So
Yeah, here you are. And thanks again for the complete care package of all of your artwork. I'm still looking through it. If anyone else wants to check it out, is does this live digitally anywhere?
yeah, you can, if you go to my website, which is alone-music.co.uk, and you can see all of the artworks and things, because I think some of the links broke in my previous Weekly Beats tracks and things. So the whole lot is there. I'm on
Awesome.
Bandcamp and I'm on Spotify and all the places.
Cool.
I'm on Blue Sky now as well.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm
Get
mostly
it.
posting about Warhammer, so that's mostly what I do these days.
Well, I'll add some links to the show description so people can check it out. And yeah, we're gonna play it on out with Freelancer. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Have a good one.